Can we, forgive me, we're going to run short. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Foreign Secretary, can I move us on a bit, even if not geographically by that far? The recent events in Kurdistan over the weekend particularly were alarming. The referendum held in September was popular with Kurds, but perhaps we might want to conceive that that was perhaps premature and even could be considered provocative. I know that you were in contact over the weekend with Iraqis and Kurds to try and urge restraint or de-escalation. You said in the House on the 17th of October you referred to Kurdistan. Do you agree with the idea that Kurds should have a state of their own?
I think, Mr. Smith, your question is absolutely right in the sense that we were disappointed with the referendum, the fact that the referendum went ahead in the KRG. We tried to stop it. We lobbied against it.
Sorry, when did you first hear about the referendum?
I can't give you the exact date.
When did you first then engage with the Kurdish authorities on trying to stop it?
I'm so sorry, Mr. Tugnan, I can't tell you exactly when we first started. I remember Mr. Fallon going there. I remember making repeated phone calls to Mr. Masoud Barzani. I know that Mr. Zahawi himself interceded several points.
Before or after the summer recess?
I'm afraid I couldn't tell you.
Sorry,
I can't tell you exactly when we first started to weigh in on the Kurdish referendum, but we were certainly very active in trying to prevent it from going ahead. I can just finish my answer to Mr. Smith before I come to you, Mr. Gay. It has gone ahead. If you ask whether I envisage an independent Kurdistan, I think the answer is no. I think what we want to see is I'm a great admirer of the Kurdish people and the Kurdish ambitions and what they're achieving. If you go to Erbil, it's fantastic. You really feel it's unlike, or it could be very different from many other places in that vicinity. You know, it could be democratic, it could be liberal, it could be pluralist, and it's an astonishing thing. And I pay tribute, by the way, to Anne Clewett for everything that she's done for the Kurds over the years. This is an astonishing nation it's a nation already, but it's an astonishing polity in the making. Now, what exactly is the relationship between that Kurdish polity and the federal Iraqi structure? That is the question. It's our view that for all sorts of reasons, it's much better now to keep Iraq together. And that is what we are telling our Kurdish friends, and that's what we're telling Baghdad to. And so the important thing is for Mr. Abadi and Mr. Nechaban Barzani now to negotiate. But sorry, Mr. Gates.
Isn't it true that President Barzani made it absolutely clear in June that they're going to have a referendum in September? I'd be very interested to know what representations did we make in June and July about this issue, because I understood, I may be wrong, that we didn't really take it seriously until September, when the referendum was being held on 23rd, 24th of September.
I'm sure that Mr. Gates, you're familiar with Frank Baker.
I'm not talking about the ambassador in Iraq. I'm talking about at ministerial level. When were we really taking this issue seriously? Well,
I mean, I can tell you that we took it very seriously, and in real time, in the sense that we took it seriously when it was well possible for the Kurds, for Masoud Barzani to disengage.
So before the summer recess?
As I say, I'm virtually certain. I'm afraid at this stage I can't tell you the exact.
If you'd like to write to us, that'd be fine.
I just want to press the Peshmerga were very helpful in pushing out Daesh when the Iraqis were forced out of Kirkuk and elsewhere. We were helping to arm the Peshmerga. We are allies with the Iraqis. We are allies with the Peshmerga and the Kurds. Do you see a difficulty in trying to negotiate a course between those two? There was more than factions, because there are factions within the Kurds anyway, but you know, those two, the Iraqis and the Kurds, especially on those borders and those arguments that have been well rehearsed. Do you see a complication there, and how do you expect to navigate that?
I understand exactly what you mean. We have an old friendship with the Kurds, and I pay tribute to what they did in fighting Daesh, and I saw it myself. We owe a great debt to the Peshmerga for their bravery and for their sacrifice, and what they were doing is on behalf of all of us. And so that's why instinctively we are so supportive of the Kurds and of their aspirations. What we worry about is the KRG, I should say. What we worry about is what happens if an independent Kurdistan leads to the breakup of Iraq, because you then effectively, we fear, would have a Sunni chunk running from Iraq into Syria over an indistinguishable border. You would have a great deal of Iranian influence, and I think it would be very bad news. I think it would be something that was not in the interest of long-term stability in the region. Much better for. I mean, the interesting thing about the Nechavan Barzani, who I know well, is he is a gradualist in his approach. He has a vision for his country, but he doesn't want to do it overnight. He can see a way of doing this over time, and of not busting loose from the Iraqi structure. And I think that is what we should encourage, because the downsides are very considerable. And he has in Baghdad at the moment, in Mr. Abadi, he has, I think, about the best possible partner that he could have. I have a great deal of admiration for Mr. Abadi, and I think that they can work together to sort this out, and that's what the UK will be encouraging.
Just on this, sorry.
Go on, Mr. Austin.
Just on this, I mean, I understand, how much Britain's got invested in a strong and unified Iraq, and I understand why you want to support Abadi for fear of something worse. But if the choice is, as it appears to be, between a strong and unified Iraq acting as an Iranian puppet, which is what appears to be happening, or a more independent or more autonomous pro-Western Kurdistan acting as a sort of counterweight to Iranians' influence in the region, wouldn't the sort of morally and strategically sensible policy be to support the latter?
Well, there are some who take your view, Mr. Austin, and clearly the advisors to Masoud Barzani took that view. They thought they could do it that way. And I'm just to be absolutely clear, I am attracted very much to what is going on in Kurdistan and the possibilities of that country, given what some of the very difficult nature of the wider region. Kurdistan could be a beacon, it could be an oasis, it could be an extraordinary place. At the moment, we think that the risk of it establishing its own independence now, forthwith, would be very considerable in terms of the Iranian impingement and the general destabilization of Iraq.
So you echo the thoughts of the Colonial Secretary of 1920.
And I think it was the Colonial Secretary of 1920 who put together the three vilayets of Mosul, and Baghdad, and Basra, and with the historical result that we all know. But alas, I think any undoing of that now would or could have very serious destabilizing consequences. And if I may say so, when our Kurdish friends say that they're under threat or that the Iraqi army is attacking them and so on, we are with them in trying to restrain Baghdad, to appeal for common sense and for calm. And actually, I'm cautiously optimistic about the way things are going. The Erbil is very rattled by some of the way Baghdad is behaving, but things could be a lot worse, frankly.
Mr. Zahawi.
Thank you very much. Thank you for saying this. Walad Musa, Baghdad ambassador, was I think the original to
Musa, sorry.
Isn't the important thing now, which I think you've sort of touched on, that Prime Minister Barzani, because President Barzani Massoud has stood down today, 1st of November, the important thing is that Prime Minister Barzani, one, is encouraged to maintain the unity of Kurdistan, and then to start serious negotiations with Prime Minister Abadi, which includes security, of course, and borders and all the other things. But the important thing is to really settle the big questions or challenges that led the Kurdish nation to the sort of frustrations that sort of precipitated the 25th of September referendum, i.e. power sharing, revenue sharing, Article 140 on Kirkuk and disputed territories, and that the State Department is encouraging and saying that the disputed territories remain disputed. And could we not play a bigger role with Washington and the UN to facilitate that sort of political settlement that will then deliver a stable and prosperous Iraq, whereas maybe some of the regional forces may want to see it destabilized again and divided, whether Kurd against Kurd or Kurd against Turkmen or Sunni against Arab and so on.
I totally agree, Mr. Zahawi, that we could, and that's certainly what, when we talk to our friends in the region, they say, please convene a summit, get everyone around the table, knock heads together. Let's see how we go. I think what we're saying to them at the moment is we want them to do the talking. In the end, they've got to sort it out. It's for Erbil and Baghdad to do a deal. They haven't done a deal for ages. Now's the time.
Can we, Mr. Gates, very quickly, and then